Go. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I'm very honored to have my guest. You all know him, YB Syed Saddiq. Hello, YB. How are you?
Hello everyone. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. For those of you who don't know, right before he came on, I was messaging YB and he was ready to get on. Then he said he go and makan first. Then when he came on, I asked him, has he makan yet? He has not makan. He's on fumes right now. How are you? How are you coping?
I'm good. It's okay. I have the nasi lemak. I can smell my nasi lemak from here. But this is where, like how we deal with COVID, kena banyak bersabar. Be patient.
See, the moment you mention nasi lemak, now I can smell nasi lemak, even though there's no nasi lemak near me. Now I'm craving for nasi lemak. Okay. I just wanna start by asking. We all know that you're very busy, and you all the stuff that you've been doing for your constituency. I just wanna ask, right? So you are Malaysia's youngest ever cabinet minister. At 26 years old. How do you live life as a 20-year-old? You know what I mean? Like what do you do for fun? Because when I was your age, I was not in such a serious job as you. How do you be normal?
I like to believe I lead a normal life like any other Malaysian, and I went through the youthfulness of age when I think during my early 20s, like 21, 22, 23, when I was doing a lot of debating. So then I was traveling across the globe a lot. So I was privileged enough to be able to teach and train debaters and speakers in more than 25 countries. And while I'll travel abroad a lot, I will always extend my stay to go on a short holiday and to learn new cultures, meet up with new people. So to me, that was where I spend a lot of my time to learn, teach, but most importantly, to live out my young age. After that, once I'm back, it's really back to the grind and to work hard. And coincidentally, I joined politics. I mean, that wasn't planned, but I do not regret it at all. So if you ask, how can I deal with things, all the pressure, if your heart is in the right place, all will go well. And my heart is in the right place.
That is what a perfect answer for like an interview or beauty pageant answer. Perfect. That's like, yeah, I want world peace. I'm just curious. What do you do for fun? What do you do for fun to just like, okay, politics for now, stop for a while. What do you do for fun?
Nowadays. One is I have my two children. No, not out of wedlock. I'm talking about my two cats, Meow Meow and also Toby. Okay. They are great stress relievers. You go back home and you see them and you play with them and all be well. Two, I love watching a lot of documentaries, especially on Netflix. There are quite a lot of very interesting documentaries. I recommend Ottoman Empire.
I watched that.
Rotten and many others. Yeah. Oh, you watched it?
The rise. It's called Rise of the Ottoman Empire, right?
Yes, exactly. It's a very interesting story, right? I mean, a young guy, 21, 22 years old, was able to really take on the Ottoman Empire to the greatest height, right? I mean, winning or conquering Constantinople at a very young age.
Yeah, it's so awesome. Yeah,
Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix is one.
That docu was so interesting because it was only then I realized or I learned that he sort of like moved his ships across land to attack at an angle which they didn't suspect at all. It's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that shows, right? I mean, really, science, maths, innovation are what drove, old Turkey or today modern Turkey to great success. And that's something which we should be emulating a lot more.
Nice. So I just want to ask, so one of my heroes is Stephen Colbert, and I listened to two of his interviews where the interviewer asked him, what is the day-to-day in your life? And his answer was so fascinating because people see him on TV, but it's a whole day job, the prep that goes into his show. So I just want to ask, what does a day in the life of Syed Saddiq look like from start to end?
I actually have a very strict, disciplined kind of routine, something which I carried from my days in military school and when I got into debating. So waking up, praying my subuh prayers, and then after that, I always have my toilet time. Okay, slightly humiliating, but my toilet time is my special time. Because while I'm in toilet, I'll read my ads, my BBC, Al Jazeera, Economist ads. And then after that, I'll usually do a very short jog. It's either I'll do my morning jog or I'll do it at 5 p.m. So depending on how the day will be like. And then you start the day. During lunchtime, I have to read my local papers, whether it's The Star, Malaysia Kini, Sinar Harian, Utusan, so all to cover up on local news. At night, I must catch up on The Economist, which is the magazine, but I tune to the online magazine, so I download it and I'll play the audio version. In between, I coordinate many meetings. So if it's my constituency day, 4 days in Muar, then I really go house to house, because now you can't do any programs. So really it's about giving aid, going house to house, doing the management, etc. But during weekdays, I'll be in KL coordinating Muda, the party, and also my startup, which is Cooks, the cloud kitchen which I run. So it depends on which day, but I like to pack it up. I like to have a very disciplined and strict schedule which I follow, because it gives a great sense of organizational discipline and purpose to my life as well. And when I finish a day and I don't feel that I've brought an impact, I feel that something is off. So I think productivity and outcome-based assessment at the end of the day always works.
Right. Okay. And then in the few minutes of leisure time, you watch documentaries.
No, but fun documentaries.
Okay.
These are not like boring ones.
Nice.
Like,
True.
to be fair to Netflix, these are great, amazing documentaries.
You mentioned your new party, Muda, and just want to check in. Like, I remember I signed up for the emailing list and all that. So how's that coming along? How's Muda coming along?
To be honest, it's going on really well. We just need that final party registration. After half a year, we still have not gotten it. Our membership has grown to about 50 to 60,000, despite the fact that we can't do open recruitment. Above and beyond that, we've set up our leadership structure from national, state, now to every single parliament in Malaysia. But I think the more exciting part about Muda is that it's meant to truly disrupt politics in Malaysia. And that's where we're a lot more focused on the politics of service and the politics of policies. And that's where you see a lot of policy recommendations being forwarded. You see a lot of people, despite not having allocations, Muda Cerah, Setiawangsa, all going on the ground, providing food aid, baskets through their own crowdfunding initiatives, making sure that we are eco-friendly as well. So, it's going on quite interestingly for a party which is not even registered. But on national polling, we see the polling done by Sinar Harian and Sinchu, the largest Malay press and largest Chinese press. We are consistently in the top 5 parties in Malaysia. The most recent report by O2 Research Group putting Muda as the third most popular party, polling at about 10 to 15% on national poll. So I think it's quite interesting for a party which is not even registered, being able to get that level of coverage and support. But it's not about the support and polling. Numbers will not matter if we don't get the right leaders. That's where you look. Muda leaders, they're not just young, they're also old leaders, but people coming from different races, different backgrounds, those who are technocrats, who have won Forbes at 30 under 30, civil society leaders who are in the front lines of every single protest, NGO leaders who have created schools for stateless children, like Cikgu Ayu and many others. So it's a very interesting bunch of people, right? And I think that the dynamism, the innovation, the passion behind it, I think really has allowed us to disrupt Malaysian politics. And I want to ensure that level of energy is carried forward.
You mentioned 50 to 60,000 members, right? So what is the age grouping of them? I presume they're mostly young, but do you have a healthy amount of older people?
We do. I think our oldest member, last I checked, is 83 or 84. Average age is about 40s or early 40s. Gender-wise, it's quite balanced. Quite interestingly, even among states, it's quite balanced as well. And racial balance is almost the same, like the reflection of the Malaysian demographics. So I think that's been quite interesting. That's why you see a lot of movement in states like Kedah, Sabah, Sarawak, Johor. These are areas which I thought there won't be a lot of Muda members, but very quickly they set up shop. They already have their offices. They already set up their ground operations. And we really were trying to disrupt Malaysian politics by not being reliant on the same group of billionaires who will, in the end, hedge their bets by funding all political parties. Crowdfunding is our main form of fundraising, and it's been serving us quite well. We don't need these luxurious office spaces. We don't need to have office space in every single parliament. We work from our respective homes. We do crowdfunding based on activities. We look for a lot more in-kind contribution and cash contributions that is more accountable and transparent. I mean, if you want to talk about creating a political startup, which is meant to disrupt Malaysian politics, then we need to behave differently and also work differently as well.
I'm sure this then begs my next question. So there are talks about GE coming soon, snap elections, whatever. Do you have like a strategy on winning the election? Like how many MPs would you feel? I'm jumping the gun because the Ross hasn't gotten the stamp of approval yet. But do you have a rough idea on the attack plan?
I'm a big fan of Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and one thing which I've been taught and trained: never ever reveal your strategies to the mass public. Right? But to be honest, Jason, I'm very sure if you ask any Malaysian now, they don't want to hear political strategies, power struggles.
That's right. You're
leaders, seats. They don't care. What they want to hear is that all political parties, all elected representatives must focus on dealing with COVID, on serving the underprivileged and the poor, and then come up with proposals to revive Malaysia's economy. And that will be the focus of Muda today.
Yeah, I hear. Okay, again, quoting Sun Tzu, that is amazing. I read the book front and back, don't know how many times today. That's well done. I right now, as a 36-year-old, I feel very old. But as I grow in years, I realize that younger people are having a tougher and tougher time. In fact, I always tell my friends that it looks like this is a tipping point because previously the generations could do better than the preceding generations. My parents did better than my grandparents. I'm luckily doing better than my parents, but it feels like the future generations after us may not do better than us, And so that's why I like to talk about young people issues, and that's why I'm a fan of Muda. Now, I just want to ask, there's one particular issue which is difficult in Malaysia, but it's a lot of young people are involved, so to speak, in this. It's like the issue of the LGBT community. Now, in Malaysia, it's a thorny issue. I just want to ask, what is Muda's stance on this?
Sure. I'll break it up into two parts, right? First part on your comment about issues involving young people and also the challenges which we face, especially when we are seen to be worse off than our parents. And then second, on dealing with LGBTQIQ plus. So I'll deal with the first part. So I think it's categorically wrong when many people see our generation, and I say our because you're young as well, please don't tell me. I mean, we are all of the same generation, we're young. That we are the generation which has been mollycoddled. There's a saying, kita generasi yang manja. We get things on the silver platter. We didn't go through the days of independence. We didn't pick up the guns. But I mean, struggles are very different. And I believe that characterization of our generation is categorically wrong. Why do I say that? If you look at our generation today, in order for us to make by a day, we need to do about 2 or 3 different odd jobs. On top of that, if we look at the income level of graduates today, it's actually much, much worse than the 1980s if you factor in the rate of inflation. I mean, Khazanah Research Institute has shown that in actuality, graduates today, their income have been on a steady decline for the past 20 years when you factor in the rate of inflation. That's
Definitely.
Where we look at our parents. By their mid-30s, they could already own a house, a car, they could already get a bank loan for that. But for our generation, we can't even get the bank loan to get a house, and it's very tough, right? On top of that, our generation today is also expected to service the debt of the older generations, especially our parents. And as many research have shown, that their savings are very thin. So in the end, we are the ones who are expected to not just support ourselves and our families today, but also our parents and grandparents. And on top of that, we are hit by this pandemic, where more than 600,000 middle-class working families now have fallen through the cracks of poverty and moved into the B40 category, right? So in summary, not only are young people expected to take care of themselves, their families, they're also expected to take care of their parents and grandparents. On top of that, wages are much, much lower than 20 years ago. They cannot own assets like 20 years ago. above and beyond that, while we are facing all these challenges, we see, for example, CEOs of banks getting massive pay rise, bonuses. The richest 50 billionaires in Malaysia 2 weeks ago reported where their net wealth increased by 14%. But when we look at the working class Malaysian, they are getting poorer and poorer. Young graduates, very hard to find a job. And even if they do get a job, considering the rate of inflation, their salary is at a steady decline. I see all of this because I think this context is very important to understand what's going on in Malaysia, where if there's anyone out there who say that young people today, our generation is mollycoddled, malas, ni generasi yang manja, it's categorically wrong and false. So I want to start with that because I think the false categorization of young people hurts our ability as a country to heal and to move forward. Secondly, on a thorny issue, but one which we cannot simply hide under the rug, which is on LGBTQI+. So this issue obviously is a very sensitive issue in Malaysia, especially when we look at the position of our federal constitution. However, I think there is a compromise, and I always believe that Islam is a religion of compassion. And we look at how, I always use the reference of how Dr. Zulkifli, the minister today of religious affairs, back then, when he was serving as Mufti of Wilayah, I remember then there was a huge debate about dealing with transgender community. Should they get a job? Should they be discriminated when they apply for a job? There was this particular transgender was selling nasi lemak, got bullied, discriminated, and left to fend for herself. And in that context, Mufti Wilayah then played a very big role in calling them up, providing that support structure, still preaching true religion, but showing that religion is indeed compassionate in wanting to provide support structures for them. And my argument is, if we keep on alienating them, especially when it comes to physical abuse, discrimination in jobs, right, then you push them to a corner in which they are forced into desperation. That's where you see a lot of the transgender community, in the end, being alienated without any support structure, and then moving into prostitution and human trafficking. And I think that gets much, much worse. So what's the middle ground, which I think is in Malaysia? I think we should use compassion. We must also acknowledge that religion still has a place. However, it should be true compassion. I think the approach taken by Mufti Wilayah, I think, is the best middle ground. And while we pursue that path, we need to ensure that everyone in Malaysia deserves a proper job, a proper dignified living, and obviously not to be physically discriminated. So I think that's the ground which we should take, at least the bare minimum. And we look at countries like Singapore, which takes that ground as well, and many other neighboring countries. So I think the ground of compassion is a ground which I believe Malaysians should take up.
Yeah, I think you framed the first part of my question really well, in the sense that in essence, younger people now are facing a lot of different challenges from different angles. Like I can also empathize, because like I know that the salary or the wage of a young doctor today, a new doctor today, is exactly the same than it was for me like 15 years ago or 12 years ago. Yeah. Exactly the same. There has not been any meaningful increase since 12 years ago, and that is, it boggles my mind, because like house prices have gone up like 2 or 3 times. So in essence, a new doctor today is 2 or 3 times poorer than when I was working. And also, which brings me to my next point, which we all know that the contract doctors are facing really tough times right now. They're going to go on strike, and a lot of doctors, confirmed doctors are supporting this move, and it really breaks my heart that I see these young doctors, new doctors, already being so disillusioned. They barely begun their journeys, and they're already getting such a bad deal, And the worst part of this deal is not necessarily the pay, but there is no direct path for them to accelerate their careers or become specialists and whatnot.
Yeah. Especially
no certainty, and especially when we are fighting a pandemic, we need them. Yeah. We need them. We need to value them, and they are being left behind. So what can we do? And is there anything that you be doing or supporting this Code Black movement?
Yeah, I'm definitely supporting them. I've met up with representatives from MMA and also the representatives from the Hatal movement, and I've listened to their briefings. And truly, it's disappointing with the current response from government. This is an issue which has been there since December 2016. This is the first batch, who will deal in whether your contract will be extended or not, because it's 3 years of housemanship, 2 years of contract. So 5 years, technically it's about 2021. And until now, they still don't know that by December, will they still have a job or not? In the middle of a pandemic, where they are the frontliners, they have saved hundreds of thousands of lives of fellow Malaysians, but yet we cannot ascertain whether they'll have a job after December. And not just that, even if they do have a job, what will happen to them after? Will they be able to specialize? Will they be able to be treated the same like their senior doctors who are doing exactly the same job, same job category, same job scope? They are paid less allowances, less privileges, harder to specialize, harder to upskill. And beyond that, worse, they don't even know whether they still have a job. And I think this is tragic, and there's a great sense of injustice if we don't at least provide a level of certainty to their job prospect. I think that's the minimum which we should do. And I believe, especially if Parliament is reopened, this issue will be debated quite heatedly. And that's why I want for Parliament to reopen, because substantive legislative discussion to a unique stimulus package to help our frontliners, doctors, in the midst of a pandemic, must be secured. This should be a matter of utmost priority.
And to all those listening and watching, I hope you guys also support the Code Black movement, the doctor strike. Please Google it, and you'll find out a lot more about this. I tweeted recently that this is these new young doctors are going to be specialists who one day will take care of you when you're old, or take care of your children. So you want the best for yourself. In a way, it's for our own sakes as well. You mentioned Parliament, and it brings me back to a very happy memory, because one of the things I celebrated most in the good old days when the PH was in power was you managed to pass through the Undi 18 bill, and I was very happy. The voting age got lowered in essence then. And what was most impressive was that you managed to get bipartisan support. You crossed the aisle. How did you start talking to all these MPs, especially when they are your traditional and classic political foes?
This is where I think there is a great need to overhaul the political practices at Putrajaya. And you can have changes in government, but if you don't change the way we do politics, the true potential of Malaysia will always be trapped. And I think the winner takes all, you are my enemy, us against you kind of politics must end. There are areas of bipartisanship and common interests where we can work, and we should work together. And when we disagree on policies, we will disagree passionately. But that's fine. You don't have to character assassinate the person. You don't have to go after his family. You don't have to use state institutions against him or her. You don't have to take away his allocations and punish voters who vote for opposition. Those days should be over, right? That's why when I was a minister, in the smallest ways, through the sports ministry budget, I returned the hosting right of SUKMA to opposition states like Kelantan, where they'll get about 200 million ringgit in annual allocation for sports development, something which never happened for the past 20 years since SUKMA was created. And in cabinet, I lobbied hard to ensure that the official stance of PH government is to return back allocations to Kelantan and Terengganu state government, despite the fact it's controlled by PAS, but they are elected by the people, they are trusted by the people. It should go to them and not through an alternative parallel political body controlled by PH. And that happened. Kelantan state government got 400 million. Terengganu state government got 1.2 billion ringgit. The point I'm trying to make is we have to change the way how we deal with politics in Malaysia. If it's always about winner takes all, you are my enemy, I'll do whatever it takes to beat you, that hurts democracy. It means that the Prime Minister will be all powerful. The Prime Minister can decide on tenders. The Prime Minister can decide on who gets appointed, promoted, demoted. Really, I think that's bad for all Malaysians. We want to overhaul that system, and that's why I believe that's something which Muda is created and Muda will champion for. And I think Undi 18 was the best example for that, right? Because just to share, at first, there was great skepticism, even in cabinet. I mean, I brought this up because it's a part of our manifesto and a part which falls under my ministry. And immediately when I was appointed as a cabinet minister, I think during the second cabinet meeting already outlined, okay, Undi 18, automatic voter registration, Calon 18, there are a few legislative agendas which are under my ministry, and I have to champion this and champion this strong. At first, there was this great sense of hesitance. Oh, it's too early. We still have 5 years. It's okay, but Saddiq, we do not have 2/3 support. Very hard to pass through a constitutional amendment. And it kept on being pushed back till a point. I remember that my ability to push for Undi 18 was almost cancelled when a senior minister tried to table a constitutional amendment in early 2019, which is to recognize Sabah Sarawak as equal partners, but that was rejected by the opposition. And after that, cabinet said, I mean, your senior cabinet minister tried, it failed. It was on an uncontroversial constitutional amendment. What more on Undi 18, which will really change Malaysia's political landscape. But I learned from the past, right? I mean, you cannot simply engage in opposition once or twice and expect them to support you. I've engaged with opposition on all levels. Immediately when I was in KBS, in the Ministry of Youth and Sports, I formed a bipartisan committee made up of all youth political leaders from all parties to come together. We discussed, we reached a consensus, and then after that, we decided to bring this back to its respective parties. So after talking to them, then I started talking to mid-level leaders, the MPs. After talking to MPs, I met up with all chief ministers and ketua menteri. I flew to Sarawak, Sabah, Terengganu, Kelantan to meet up with the chief ministers, opposition states to get their consensus. And only after that did I meet up personally with all the presidents of different political parties. And I didn't expect them to come to me. I went to them. I went to their houses. I flew down to their respective states. I wanted to show that I'm very serious in this. I don't expect you to come to me. It's no longer the days where, oh, as a minister, you must come to me. Hell no, right? I go to you, I serve you coffee, I'll do whatever it takes, right? And then after that, then it comes towards political diplomacy. And obviously, they want to reach a middle ground. So that's where they say, I want this, I want this, I want this. I want this kind of compromises. I want to ensure that now there will be equal access to schools, universities, for all political parties to access. It cannot just be those in government. I want to ensure that I also get automatic voter registration. So there is the politics of compromise and diplomacy. And finally, when we got it through, and that's when we did a PC together, a landmark PC where, you know, the leader of opposition to the prime minister together. And when it entered parliament, I knew the deal was sealed because we agreed to compromises. We tabled it together. It is a collective agenda of those in government and opposition. But to me, that just shows that there is great hope in Malaysian politics. You know, the days of the past where, you know, it's government takes all, opposition takes all. Not true. Work together, areas of common interest, and show that we can rise above the politics of hate and division, and that bipartisanship and putting national interest can work and can come first.
And so right now there's like the current ruling coalition is putting up roadblocks to this. That how are you optimistic that, you know, we will get through this?
I'm the same bipartisan group which was successful in getting Undi 18 through is still alive. And that's where I'm still glad to see the Minister of Youth and Sports, the Minister of Science and Innovation, many of the ministers, Saifuddin Abdullah, all coming together and saying that it must be done before next election. And I believe there was a cabinet meeting where it was already decided that it must be implemented by July. So, and that cabinet meeting did make a decisive decision. So they must fulfill their promise and oath. If it is not, I'm very sure Malaysians will punish them in the next election. But the good thing is bipartisanship still is strong. So I'm still in touch with my friends from UMNO, from other parties to ensure that we get this through, because it is our collective success. And if they really uphold the constitution, which they keep on saying that they do, then this is one of the most important areas where they must defend and uphold the constitutional integrity of an important law passed in parliament unanimously. We must defend it.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that that happens. Another issue that has been plaguing us is that Parliament is not open, and what surprised me as a layperson, as a citizen, is that, you know, the Istana Negara has issued statements, sort of saying, look, Parliament should be open soon. I think 3 times already, you know, and yet I'm amazed by the let's just say the audacity of the powers that be to kind of delay it, you know, even further. What's your take on this? And
can we hope that Parliament be reopened sooner rather than later? I think that's the problem, right? I think this government is so toxicated with power that they think that they can do whatever they want. It's not just about the rulers coming up 3 times asking for parliament to reopen, but as a basic functioning democracy, the parliament is the beating heart of the people, right? Where opposition comes in as an important role to check to check the roles of government. Checks and balances are there to debate about important policies. How do we deal with COVID? How do we get out of COVID? What about all the direct nego contracts which are taking place? What about the 150,000 laptops which have been promised? What about the massive under testing which takes place today? All these kind of things will be debated and discussed. But yet, I think they're so intoxicated with power that even after the king and the Malay rulers saying open parliament, open parliament, open parliament, they're still hesitant and they're maintaining this stance. I think only today, suddenly, I think they had to make a U-turn after everyone have been turning against them. But even then, they haven't given a date. So until then, we have to wait. So I'm of the opinion that this level of arrogance will be punished now or later, whether it's during the next election or immediately by those in government who I believe who still have that great sense of moral conscience to uphold the spirit of democracy. And this is where we have to give credit to people like Azalina Osman, the deputy speaker, right, who has been upholding the integrity of the House of Parliament. So in this area, I believe government will be forced to reopen Parliament. If not, I think there will be a tsunami of anger from the people in which they will regret later on.
Yeah, but again, let's just hope that happens. Like I said, I've always been a fan of your work, and I'm about to ask you a question which takes us back a few years ago. The rather controversial preacher Zakir Naik said something about how the non-Malays are guests here, and then they should be asked to leave first, whatever. That was quite very sad, quite a personal stab in a lot of non-Malays who are Malaysians, and you obviously issued a statement condemning that statement, and then after that there was a post where you invite him to dinner or whatever, and that to us non-Malays here it seems like a U-turn. I just want to ask what led up to it, and what were your thoughts behind it?
Yeah, I want to start off by saying that I think I need to explain the context of how that happened. I remember the day where Zakir Naik released a statement that I think in it first was a very personal attack against Lim Kit Siang, and then after that against all Chinese and all Indians, right? Because he said, because Ramasamy and a few were attacking him, therefore Indians were less patriotic, which is ridiculous. And calling non-Malays as less patriotic or pendatang is clearly uncalled for, is wrong. And even if after on he said it's only directed to Lim Kit Siang, no matter what people say, is a Malaysian, proud Malaysian, born here, and in no way is pendatang, right? So I remember it was, I think on a Wednesday morning, because it was during a cabinet meeting. And when it was released, I was one of the few in cabinet to immediately say that action must be taken, that there must be justice, because it's not the first time that this statement is out. And cabinet did agree that we need to find for another country for him to go, because Malaysia is no longer an option, because we are a multiracial, diverse, moderate country. And this kind of statements should never be tolerated. So that's why after cabinet decision, I came out with a statement as well, condemning his statements. And I believe I was one of the only Bersatu leaders then who did so. And mind you, it was quite tough, because Bersatu is a Malay party, Malay Muslim party, and being the only one to do so, and not having top party leaders backing me up, it was truly tough. But I held my ground. I believe in what I said, and this kind of rhetoric, narrative, and statements will do great injustice to our fellow Malaysians, regardless of race and religion. The complicated part came after. If we look back in history, what happened then? I remember it was during the weekend. There was starting to be like almost like a protest and counter protest. One, a protest done in Indian Street, and then after that, another counter protest which was about to be led by Zakir Naik supporters at the same street as well, right after the first protest. Problem then is, as we have witnessed in Malaysia's history, whenever we have two groups with very different polarizing viewpoints meeting up with one another, is a recipe for disaster, right? And obviously we didn't want for that to happen. So there were people who were tasked to meet up with one group of protesters and another group tasked to meet up with the other group of protesters. And that's why we're trying our best to de-escalate tension from taking place. I think in hindsight, I should not have publicized the meeting. It wasn't dinner. It wasn't a dinner. It was really to de-escalate what was taking place. In hindsight, I do not need to frame it in a way as if I agreed with his viewpoints, because clearly I don't. And I made that very clear in the meeting that I detest the statements made. And he came out in public after apologizing as well, saying that those statements are wrong. And he was merely targeting Lim Kit Siang. But even then, I said it's wrong. Even in the meeting, I mentioned that Lim Kit Siang is born in Malaysia. He's a Malaysian hero, no matter what you say. We may have different political viewpoints, but I mean, he has been in Malaysian politics for a long time and has served Malaysians regardless of race and religion. I'll defend that viewpoint until today, even though in the future I may be on different political spectrums, but we can agree to disagree and still respect each other as fellow Malaysians. So I think that was what happened then. I think moving forward, I need to be a lot more circumspect in what I post and who I meet and how I angle it. My honest and sincere move then was really to de-escalate detention. And that's where you see, I think the tough part was other politicians all played safe. Literally everyone didn't comment and just kept quiet. And it was me, I think, I can't recall any other Malay politicians who went up and said, deport him, which I did. And I maintained that viewpoint. It's just the problem then in cabinet, as we were all briefed. Initially, Saudi didn't want to take him. UAE didn't want to take him. Literally, no one wanted to take him, and that's obviously no longer within my portfolio to negotiate with these countries. But I definitely do not want to see Malaysians on the streets protest and counter-protest, which I believe will lead to disaster. However, as a fellow Malaysian who believe in multiracialism, I should not be seen to kowtow to a religious preacher who has sowed divisions in the hearts and minds of fellow Malaysians. So if I've hurt anyone, I truly apologize. I've already mentioned this before. I'll continuously mention it. So being a young politician, I have a lot to learn, but moving forward, I think we all need to be reminded that Malaysia is a country for all Malaysians. No one should be called pendatang. No one should be seen as unpatriotic just because the color of his or her skin and the race which he or she is associated to. Because by now, after decades of independence, we are in this together, we are on this ship together, sink or sail together. I think that's the beauty of Malaysia.
Thank you. Touching on a subject which also has a similar flavor, one of your most impressive videos was when you, I think you went on BBC Hard Talk, and this was during the time when the Israeli-Palestine tensions were raised, and then I think Malaysia stopped the swimming team, I think, from Israel to enter, and you gave a passionate defense on that move. And then recently, like 2-3, I think a month or so before, the Israeli-Palestine tensions rose again, and and you again spoke very passionately about it. Now, I'll be honest, as a Malaysian Chinese, I don't really know much about this Israeli-Palestine conflict. I always hear the words Gaza, the bank, and all that. What actually is happening? Because I want to learn and I want to know what's actually going on, because it always crops up, and I don't know how. I want to hear from someone close to me to know the real situation and what actually is happening.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to summarize, it will take a whole lecture, but allow me to attempt to summarize it in 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'm a believer in a rules-based system. I'm against indiscriminate killings of civilians on either side, when in Palestine and Israel, and I subscribe to that rules-based system. And that rules-based system of international law has clearly stated that Israel, specifically under the leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu, had committed war crimes and crimes of atrocities during operations Kaslet, Pillars of Defense, and Protective Edge, where innocent Palestinians have been bombarded, killed, murdered indiscriminately. till a point that the International Criminal Court wants to drag Netanyahu and charge him. But Israel is not a signatory to the Roman Statute and a party to the International Criminal Court to that extent. And up to today, while many countries are talking about the two-state solution, and mind you, Malaysia, despite not having ties with Israel, the official Malaysian government stance under all governments, BN, PH, PN, is a two-state solution where we, again, respect the rules-based system and to ensure that there are no indiscriminate killings, there's peace, long-lasting peace. Problem is, what Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing, and even I think under this government, my fear, just a brief update, Netanyahu has lost the vote, and now there is a new prime minister, but who's also a very right-wing prime minister as well, the mentee to Netanyahu, and that's where there's a problem. But it's a more moderate government. But it's a long debate. I won't talk about that.
Yep.
However, the two-state solution will be impossible because for a two-state solution to be viable, you must agree on the redelineation of land, borders, etc. Right? Problem now, as each day passes by, the Israeli Defense Force and the government is taking over houses, land belonging to Palestinians today. I'm not talking about the land in 1950s, 1960s. I'm not even talking about the 1967 borders. Today, where Palestinian families are living, they are forcefully evicted out from their houses by force, by military force, by the police, humiliated, dragged out from their house, and witnessing their house demolished in front of their eyes. If you are a Palestinian, how would you feel, right? Imagine if you are in Malaysia and you see, the military and the police forcing you out of your house and saying that you do not belong here. It touches the heart. That's why I always remind my Malay friends as well who say that, Chinese Indians are penatang, hey, and yet you defend Palestine. At the same time, I also tell my Chinese Indian friends who want to understand this issue, how would you feel if this happens to you? We all have something to learn from this. And that's why I feel very passionate, because how can we say that Malaysia believes in democracy and in a rules-based system, but on the other hand, we are a complicit through our silence in not speaking up on this issue? So in summary, what I did when I was a Minister of Youth and Sports, not to just punish Israeli athletes, no. But in that rules-based system, how is it fair that I allow Israeli athletes to play and compete in Malaysia, but the same Israeli government disallow Palestinian athletes to represent their country in international competitions? Mind you, if you are a Palestinian athlete, you need express permission from Israeli government to travel out and to compete. On top of that, they lobby so hard. The Minister of Youth and Sports of Israel lobbied NBA to delist anything to do with Palestine, to the point that NBA had to apologize. There's a whole debate around that. But I'm a believer in peace and a rules-based system. And we need to follow that rules-based system in order for us to move forward. We don't need to go on extreme ends by saying, wipe out this country, wipe out these people. No, I'm not against the Jewish community. I'm not against Jews. I'm not against the religion. What I'm against are people like Netanyahu, who indiscriminately kill, who's a war criminal, and it is those people who I fight. That's why there are people like Norman Finkelstein, many senior rabbis who oppose the violent atrocities of the Israeli government. They are also Jews. They also subscribe to Judaism. Similarly, if there are those who say that Islam is a religion of violence, it's not true. There are good people on all sides. We need to come together to show that this is a humanitarian issue, not a religious issue, not only an issue involving Israel and Palestine. It is deep to our hearts. And that's where, as a human being who believes in justice, who believes in compassion, we have a role to play in pursuing that level of compassion and justice.
Right, I think that's a very good 2 to 3 minute summary. I think one of the best, I have to say. I want to bring us back into to Malaysia, and as we all know, this thing will reverberate through the ages. When Lanka Sheraton happened, I remember feeling that weekend, as a citizen, on seeing on social media, like my heart just sank a bit lower every time, a bit lower and a lower until it finally became a reality. I'm curious, and I ask this question to all the MPs who I've had the privilege to speak to. Like, how much earlier on did you guys know that Lanka Sheraton was in the offing? Something suspicious was afoot. Was there any sinister signs before it happened?
it's hard for me to say because I have opposed it even when the discussion
Yep.
was in its preliminary stage. And because I kept on opposing it, I was left out of the so-called Publica group where there are meetings there.
I see.
I was because I mean there were discussions a few months before that.
Wow.
And then when I was consulted, I said, no, I will never agree. This is ridiculous. And I think this is a big betrayal of the people's mandate. No one will ever trust in our party anymore. I was Bersatu. No one will trust in Malaysian democracy because literally this is a backdoor government. And I remember when I said that to Tan Sri Muhyiddin, Hamzah Zainuddin was there. They were like, biasalah, ini anak muda, cepat marah. I say, it's not anak muda. This is just bad for Malaysia. And I'm pretty sure if you ask an older guy, he said the same thing. It's nothing to do about the spirit of a young guy to oppose everything. And also I was discarded from that group till a point that during the final meeting of Bersatu Supreme Council, which decided the exit from Pakatan Harapan, I was informed of that meeting at the very last minute. Mind you, I woke up early in the morning. Suddenly I checked my message. Oh, suddenly there's a meeting, an emergency meeting. I am one of the co-founders of Bersatu, a Supreme Council member, youth chief, a part of Bureau Politics, and yet I was only informed that morning of the change in schedule. It was so obvious that they wanted to keep me out of the loop because they knew my stance and I would oppose it. However, small secret, I didn't shower that morning. I rushed immediately to Bersatu's HQ, right. And before the official Supreme Council meeting was a small Bureau Politic meeting where Tun chaired. And I pleaded to Tun, Tan Sri, Datuk Sri Mukris, Hamzah, a few others there. I said, do not do it, right? This is bad, it's wrong for Malaysia. And I remember Tun believed in it. And Tun said, no, we already had Majlis President PH meeting. PH supported me. Because there are a few leaders around Tun who kept on spreading lies saying, Tun, during PH meeting, they will ask for you to resign. They'll set a specific date in May. If not, you have to resign immediately, which all didn't happen. Yes, it was heated, and it was heated for a reason. I was very passionate in that meeting because I knew if the outcome was different, the instigators of the Sheraton move will win. And before that meeting, it's not that I just was passionate. I spoke to Gobind Singh, I spoke to Anthony Loke, I spoke to the leaders already. I know what my party wants to do. I pleaded to them, please don't. Come to a consensus together. We did, right? So that's where, if you look back, I will never fight in public on matters like this. I'll never ask for Anwar to step down. Anwar doesn't deserve to become PM. Never. I've always insisted on the transition from Tun to Anwar to take place. Problem is, even after the PH consensus, Bersatu still wanted to leave. So when the meeting happened, it was clearly orchestrated already. I mean, even when I objected passionately, and then people say, Saddiq, you're too young, you don't understand. And then one by one, Supreme Council members saying, no, we need to leave, we need to leave, we need to leave. And as I said on record, off record, I've opposed it. Everyone who attended the meeting will know that I opposed it. If there was a leak of the 3-hour-and-a-half meeting, you'll never find anyone who spoke up against it more passionately than me, because I even mentioned at one point in time that even if Tun Dr. Mahathir agreed to it, I will oppose him. And even if Tun and Tan Sri, both persons who brought me to politics, I think this is wrong, and I will oppose them. I will not support this party decision because I think it's wrong. And I remember there were those who said, oh, Saddiq, but you went to Sheraton, you were at the hotel. I mean, as I said on record as well, and they can check on this, immediately after Bersatu Supreme Council meeting, that was at about 5 p.m., 6 p.m. it ended. Then we were all called up, Bersatu MPs were called up to meet up at Sheraton for another meeting. Before I went to that meeting, I decided to meet up with Tun because people kept on using Tun's name. Using the Prime Minister's name is very effective. So I went to Tun's house without anyone knowing. I brought Rina Harun with me because I wanted a witness. And when we went, I asked Tun, do you know that tonight there's a meeting at Sheraton? And to my surprise, Tun went berserk. He said, no, I told them not to do it. Why are they still proceeding with this? And I'm like, but Tun, all of us are called to go to Sheraton. All the MPs from Bersatu, and we have a meeting there. And I remember Tun said, Saddiq, the same way how you argued during Bersatu meeting in the morning, you argue against them. I said, Tun, I will not let you down. I went and I argued. Immediately when I reached Sheraton, that's why you don't see me smiling, going or shaking hands or raising the hands of whoever, Hisham or Tunku Adnan. No, I immediately went to Bersatu's room, or where all the MPs are congregating. Tan Sri Muhyiddin was there. And I told Tan Sri, Tun, the Prime Minister, the chairman of the party did not agree and consent to this. This is wrong. And everyone looked at me and was like, what's this bugger, this young guy saying this? But I was not afraid. I think it's wrong. And then immediately after that, I left. So you see me leaving really early. And immediately after I left, who did I call? I called Anwar Ibrahim, Mat Sabu, Guan Eng. I brought them early morning to see Tun at Prime Minister's office. When Tun didn't appear, I brought them to Tun's house because I believe that PH is the way forward. It is a multiracial moderate coalition. It's not perfect, but we need to come together. And until the end, even after 6 months change in government, before I was expelled from Bersatu, Armada, the youth wing of Bersatu, rejected the new alignment with UMNO, despite the Prime Minister is the president of our party. So for those who say, I paling tadah, I think the facts speak for itself. And I was expelled from the party which I helped co-founded, my very first party. So it is nostalgic, it is painful. I have no regrets because I believe that in the end, a party is merely a vehicle of people's aspiration. And when you betray people's trust and aspiration, then that vehicle deserves to be removed and changed.
So then, this then brings me to the next question, which is I feel more important than the one I just asked you, is that of course there are a large group of people who hope for PH to come back in some way, shape, or form, or some semblance of the mandate that we got on May 9th of May 2018. How do we, or how do you as an MP prevent such a thing from happening again? Anti-party hopping laws, or change the election system. How do we prevent this? Because it's very painful, and honestly, I don't want to go through it again.
Yeah, this is why I feel most passionate, and this is exactly why I set up Muda. I want to break through the monopoly or oligopolies of the politics of establishment and the old ways of doing politics in Putrajaya where winner takes all. We need to immediately implement before election an anti-hopping law. We need to ensure that all members of parliament, state legislative assemblymen get equal allocations so that there's no incentive financially for them to jump to take care of their constituents. We need to ensure that the Prime Minister is not a winner-takes-all Prime Minister. Reduce the power of the executive. All important appointments, Attorney General, Chief of the Military, Chief of the Police, Chief of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, make sure that it's done through proper scrutiny in Parliament, voted, so that the Prime Minister is not a winner-takes-all Prime Minister with a discretionary budget worth billions of ringgit to buy over MPs. Those days are over. And that's why I think we need to preach a new kind of politics through bipartisanship, compassionate, justice, no longer winner takes all, break through the politics of establishment and these all kind of parties which keep on establishing new things. That's why even in PH, I remember when they were my colleagues, cabinet colleagues, who said, oh no, we need to set up a parallel political body in Terengganu and Kelantan. It cannot be given to us a state government because it's underpassed. That's the biggest hypocrisy ever when we are in opposition. Oh, cannot. Or when we have chief ministers who come from opposition states, we go berserk. Oh, why is Selangor being mistreated? Why is Penang being mistreated? And then we do the same. Ridiculous. Back then, I was, I think, one of the only and strongest cabinet ministers who said all MPs should get equal allocations. I remember I was ridiculed. Saddiq, you are too naive. And recently, when I said, and this is our mistake, right? We didn't do it. And I brought this up in the group of MPs, or opposition MPs, and there were many senior MPs say, Saddiq, you are idealistic lah, come on, it's too early for this is wrong. In the end, it will be used for UMNO, will be used for PATH. And now when we're in opposition and we don't get equal allocations, we complain. Come on, guys. This is why I say Muda is meant to disrupt. Enough of these old guys, enough of this old kind of politics. When you're in Putrajaya, you change it and change it meaningfully. And you say it now. You can do it in Selangor, you can do it in Penang. Why isn't Penang state government giving equal allocations to all adults? Why isn't Selangor state government giving equal allocations to adults? Why can Johor Menteri Besar give equal allocations to opposition states? Why can Perak Menteri Besar under UMNO giving equal allocations? Come on. How much longer are we going to be trapped in this bubble, right? Because if not, Jason, my fear is post-election, same shit will happen. So that's where I think to move forward, we cannot have marginal small changes. Disrupt Malaysian politics, overhaul Putrajaya, have a political funding act in place so that the billionaires can no longer control all political parties, cage their bets so that whoever is in power will always work for their whims and fancies. change that so that we get meaningful change in Malaysia. Because to be honest, in a short time span which I've served in cabinet, I think there's a lot of great potential which we can do. If I can get Undi 18, 2/3 support in less than 1 year, I think we could do a lot more things, but we need that political will. I mean, minimum wage, heck, it shouldn't be my job to champion it, but I had to do it. And I had to not just bring minimum wage, I had to present a paper on a dignified wage, gaji bermaruah, right? But again, if there's still same old practice, that's where all the big billionaires, tauques will say, oh, cannot, if not, we will leave Malaysia. Come on, right? Malaysia has one of the lowest tax rates. We have the cheapest foreign labor ever. They will not leave. We subsidize electricity, gas. I mean, cost of doing business is really low. I mean, stop threatening, the middle-class Malaysians at their expense, and you can profiteer in billions during times of pandemic. We need to change how we do business in Putrajaya.
Yep. Listening to you speak, so passionately about change, reminds me of leaders like, say, Obama when he said he ran for president. Yes, we can. We need change. We need change now. And closer to home, also, it reminds me of when I think it was 2008 when Anwar Ibrahim was speaking about reformasi. And it history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And of course, using different terms, whatever, it reminds me of Anwar Ibrahim's reformasi or whatever. And so I just want to ask, like, how comfortable would you be, or how comfortable would your party be if, say, today or tomorrow or next week Anwar Ibrahim is president? Are there any reservations, any things you wanna advocate to him?
We have to be fair to Anwar Ibrahim. He has preached idealism, virtues of reformasi, which is to reform democracy in Malaysia and to ensure that the rule of law stands. On that part, we will gladly support, no problem. On top of that, as someone who won on the PH ticket, I'm obligated to follow the transition timeline. The problem only comes, and usually when I say this, the media will only quote the problem, didn't quote the part where I agree, I have no to support him, is that if the support comes together with the very same people who we defeated, who are known as global kleptocrats, to shore up a new government, to show what the personal meaning behind it. The reason why I abandoned my ministerial portfolio, got expelled from my party, expelled from my youth chief position, the party which I helped co-founded, left everything because I fought my very own party saying that this is wrong. I do not want to, join hands with the enemies of the Malaysian people, the rules of law, because once we do so, then we will be compromised. And I left government. And it's fine. I'm in opposition. I got expelled. Suddenly, I make a U-turn now just because I want to be back in government, even though it's joining hands with the same people who I believe will weaken Malaysian democracy even more. Anwar Ibrahim as a person, great guy, great virtues. That part, I think, is no problem supporting. But it's what will the new government look like? So for Muda, personally, and what we've discussed, I think in the end, we want to focus on being an effective opposition. Let us be the voice of reason in opposition, to hold the government to account, enough checks and balances, and let the people, the voters, decide on our fate. Because to be honest, I'm pretty sure fellow Malaysians are tired and exhausted of hearing the politics of power struggles in times of pandemic. They want to hear what are our solutions to get us out of this pandemic and to revive the Malaysian economy. And we will focus on that.
So to all the viewers and listeners, I'm about two questions away from wrapping up, and then I'll throw it to you guys to ask YB some questions. Once again, thanks everyone for tuning in and spending a Friday night with us. Okay, so please keep the questions in the comments. We'll try and answer as many as possible. I remember reading one of your tweets on and it was you. There was a photo of you like looking a bit guilty and in front of Tun M's desk. And the story you was telling was like, you arrived for a meeting, and you said something like you'll be 5 minutes late, and then Tun M looks at his watch and you're actually 7 minutes late, right? So I just want to ask, like, any anecdotes you can share. What is it like to work in such close capacity with Tun M?
You see, you can disagree with Tun M on his politics, but one thing which is really hard to disagree on his work ethic. I mean, when I worked for him prior to election, and everyone wanted to distance themselves from him, and when I worked for him for almost 2 years, I didn't get paid by him, by the way. It was a challenge which he gave me, and I took it on. He will enter office before 8:30, never leave earlier than 5:30. Every night will tour across Malaysia to rally the people. On weekends, he'll work even harder. His only short break will be on Sunday morning, where he goes for cycling or where he drives his car. You'll see that. But after that, he will fly off and go campaign state by state. So his work ethic is unbelievable. Even when we formed the government, I mean, he didn't spend much time. You know, people ask me like how he survives and how he's still alive at his old age, how he's still very sharp. He will get sick when he's on a holiday. But when he's on a holiday and he does work writing speeches, immediately he loses sickness and he gets back on point and start to focus. So I think work ethics is unbelievable. And the posting which I shared before, I think showed that, right? I mean, he really meticulously cares about timing. And I remember, and it wasn't my fault. I remember that day, because I always take the public transport from my house. I was renting a room in USJ, so I wanted to go to Taman Bahagia. And the LRT actually stopped. I mean, it stopped for like 15, 30 minutes. It stopped. And I was late because of that. So when I met up with Tun, I said, Tun, sorry, 5 minutes late because, I explained there was an LRT hiccup, And then Tun looked at his watch. No, you're not late for 5 minutes, you're late for 7 minutes. So I'm like, come on, man, give me a break, And I'm like, but I think on work ethics, there's a lot which I learned from him. And I've served many people, and being someone young, I have a lot to learn, and that's definitely something which I like to carry on. Is the bravery, the ability to think out of the box to achieve a particular outcome, and discipline, really ruthless discipline to reach a particular objective.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want one last question before we take some questions. I'm sure you get this a lot, but I've never actually heard you answer this. But do you one day hope to become the Prime Minister of Malaysia?
This is an honest answer from me. In Malaysian politics, so far, everyone who has dreamt of being a Prime Minister and so focused or obsessed on it have not become the Prime Minister. Those who didn't expect have become Prime Ministers. So one thing which I know for sure is that I love being in public service, and I want to continue to become a public servant and to serve. Whether it is a minister or Prime Minister's post in the future, too early to tell. And I'm young and I have a lot to learn. And that's my answer.
Damn. Man, if you ever get out of politics, please consider PR coaching. That's excellent, and I really felt that. I felt the answer too. Before I go to the questions, I just wanna ask of you something. I remember tweeting you about this. So when you were a minister at KBS, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is something that I'm very passionate about, and I remember tweeting. I at you about this guy. His name is Adam. He's one of the most brilliant jiu-jitsu grapplers in Malaysia, homegrown, home-based, and I want to advocate for the sport of Brazilian jiu-jitsu because in the last SEA Games, we managed to win a bronze medal in the men's division and a silver medal in the women's division. So, if you ever find yourself back in cabinet or in the portfolio of the Ministry of Sports, please do have in the corner of your eye the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it's a young sport. A lot of young people will be in it. The majority of new grapplers will be young people, and I feel that it's an avenue for Malaysia to win medals, not just in the SEA Games, but in bigger games in the future. So just do look out for BJJ in the corner of your eye in the future. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a question here from Lee the Bear on YouTube. Any learnings from your time at NUS that you will want to implement in Malaysia? And by the way, I'm so impressed that you're the only person I know who has turned down Oxford not once but twice, and you took a scholarship I think at UNS. So what learnings from your time in NUS that you want to implement in Malaysia?
To be honest, a lot. A lot. Start by reforming GLCs. In Singapore, they call it differently, and we had a whole session with many leaders of Temasek, GIC, to speak about how they're able to build Temasek, which is much younger than Khazanah, I believe, led by the wife of the Prime Minister. However, from a sovereign fund of managing $300 million US, now I believe it's valued at about 300 billion Sing dollars.
That's a 1,000 times growth.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
Jesus. Okay.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it's amazing. I have to check. I think it's like the 30. No, it's not 30 billion. It's definitely 300 billion. It's amazing, right? And it's really competency, focus on sheer merit, including handpicking Malaysians. They're very smart. They'll take the smartest and brightest Malaysians, get them in as PR first, and then after a few years, assess them. They do well, pop, immediately become a citizen. And
yes.
And it's quite painful for me as a patriot to see our smartest and brightest do much better there. And we see people like Anthony Tan, right, the founder of Grab. He started in Malaysia.
That's so
My Taxi.
Very painful.
And if you hear his story, you know, he's a patriot. I hate it when people say, "Oh, he moved to Singapore, he's unpatriotic." That's wrong. I mean, why did he move to Singapore? People need to listen to his story. He applied to get funding from Khazanah. He did apply to get funding from GLCs and state agencies. He was turned down, right? And in the end, many other subpar startups got all this kind of support because they have political links. They come from a particular race, but he didn't. And in the end, it was Temasek who believed in him. It was Japanese and Chinese funders who believed in him. And then he moved to Singapore, and he bloomed. And who's the biggest winner? Singapore. Who's the biggest winner? Temasek, who invested in him. Temasek would get like, my God, I mean, the multiples which Temasek would have gotten is unbelievable. Imagine if Khazanah invested, PNB invested. Oh my God. I mean, we would be so happy because when he succeeds, not only is there a reputational advantage for Malaysia, but it's really money in the bank. So, I mean, there's a lot to learn. So, and that part, GLC reform. Another, I mean, if I start speaking about this, there's a lot. There's a lot which I think Malaysia is doing good as well in terms of media freedom, which I believe we are better.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if you look in Singapore, everything is controlled, right? I mean, there they don't believe that the media is meant to check on government. The media is meant to be one of the arms of government to support the messaging of the government. But in Malaysia, it's really, you know, media is another force to check the government. So, but there are different reasons behind it, different competencies. Corruption is one, right? I mean, in Singapore, I mean, a minister was corrupted, not even proven in court to be corrupted yet, right? Just, just for going on a holiday with a billionaire or with one of the Tauques, and then got caught, potentially linking one tender, and then was about to be charged, and the person tragically, I think, commits suicide. So, and then after that, no one dared to deal with corruption anymore. So there are many areas which I think we can learn. And as fellow Malaysians, we don't have to be egoistic saying, we are good in everything. There's nothing for us to learn. Some parts we are better. I insist there. Our food is so much better. Our culture is better. There are many areas which I think we are better. However, we must also admit that there are areas where they're better learn, right? Malaysians and Singaporeans share a lot of commonalities. Where we can learn together, we learn together. Where we can work together, we work together. Let's not, build so many walls between us till a point that egoism wins and arrogance wins. And in the end, we cannot work together, learn from one another in areas which I believe we can meaningfully develop our respective country.
The example of like Anthony Tan going over to Singapore, I also met up with this guy. He's the top liver resection surgeons in Singapore, and he's Malaysian. He was I think he got his degree in Malaysia, and then when he went over there, he's like one of the top 7 or 5 surgeons in Singapore, right? And when he tried to come back to Malaysia, there were a lot of red tape that prevented him from fully servicing Malaysia. I think that's really sad. Hope that changes. Hopefully you get to be the catalyst for that change and get back those top brains from Singapore back to us. A rather nice general question from Anthony Liao. YB, any comment on the recent vaccination programs?
So, I mean, I'll be generous on this. I think to be fair to YB Kari Jamaluddin, he was roped in to this quite late, right? In actuality, it should be the role of the health minister. I think he botched it. It's a failure, and I think he should step down. I've said this before. I will continue to say that. The vaccination negotiations started really late. Other countries started by mid-2020. We started late 2020. And that's why we see vaccine rollout in March, April, while our neighboring countries started much, much earlier.
Yes.
But despite being late on the boat, I think now, at a continuous vaccination rate, about 150 to 250,000 a day is good. Can we improve? Definitely. I think we should have a lot more mobile vaccine centers. To be fair, government has been listening and is doing that. In my constituency in Muar, we've provided for 2 or 3 buses to go into the rural heartlands to vaccinate. And I'm going house to house as well. So I think that part can be better instead of fetishizing over these big PPVs. But I think that part, there's been improvement. Where are we still lacking, and where I think there's ground for improvement? One is, I don't know what took government so long to allow for different vaccine portfolios to be used, whether it's Sinopharm, whether it's Johnson Johnson. I mean, really, if the international community has accepted it, why suddenly are we making it so difficult for it to be administered? I think there's really a bureaucratic problem in Malaysia, and that has to be resolved. 2, I think our ability to reach out, because now if you look at those who have registered, it's still not a good number. And you cannot blame Malaysians for not registering. Initially, I thought, is there a lot of vaccine hesitancy? This anti-vax is very strong. Not true. In my constituency in Muar, when I go house to house, let's say, I've registered about 1,000 families who were not registered in the MySejahtera before in the past 2 months. And when I go house to house, let's say I take 10 sample size families, 9 will immediately register after I go. That means previously they didn't know. They didn't know how, I immediately get them registered. Only 1, there will be some level of vaccine hesitancy, but after I talk to them, if I still fail, I'll call their children, hey, talk to your parents now. Finally they will register. I've never encountered, there's only 1 person I've recently, 2 weeks ago, who was really vaccine hesitant. Children all registered already, all in KL. So the children can't come down because of MCO, so can't convince the parents face to face. So then they called me up, I went. So the father initially was very hesitant. So pujuk. After 10-15 minutes, father said, okay. The mother, I failed. The mother was crying, like really crying to me, promising I will not come out of my house. I'm of this age, I'll just stay inside. YB, please, YB. So I said, okay. However, if I fail, I'm going to bring your doctor. Will you allow for me to get your doctor? I said, okay. So okay, I'll try. If I fail, I'll bring the doctor. But I mean, really, we need to accelerate on that front, cover the rural heartlands. Next, vaccination of undocumented workers in Malaysia.
Yeah.
I mean,
big one.
I think YBKJ is spot on. He's right, but that's why you see Perikatan Nasional has so many different messages. Hamzah Zainuddin saying, no, we're going to clamp down on them, we're going to send them back. I mean, why would they come out to get vaccinated when in the end they know they will be punished, criminally prosecuted, or sent back? And the reality is they are already a part of us, right? They live in KL. In Muar, they come to Muar City every weekend. So I mean, we keep on thinking, why is the rate of COVID cases skyrocketing? I mean, there's a substantial portion of workers in Malaysia, unvaccinated, living among us, working with us, and yet we say, we want to reach herd immunity. Forget them. We need to improve on that front. So there are a lot of areas where we should improve. To be honest, to me, the greatest failure is the lack of coordination among ministries. You see Ismail Sabri saying one, you say Azmin saying one. I mean, is it EMCO? Is it not? God knows. Can we use the meaty letter? Can we not? Ismail Sabri saying no. Azmin Ali say can. I do not know. I think a lot of Malaysians are as confused as me. Right? And I mean, do you watch Euros, Jason? Euros?
no. I don't follow football.
Yeah.
But yeah, please go ahead. What's it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's frustrating because when I watch, they stay up. I mean, the stadiums are all packed.
Oh yeah.
I mean, these are countries who, mind you, last year were much, much worse than us, and we made fun of them, right? And to be fair, Malaysia last year
was doing well.
We were one of the best performing countries. Bloomberg COVID Index, we were ranked 16th in the world. Now, just 2 days ago, we are ranked third from the bottom. Economist Index today on COVID, we are the worst performing country. How depressing is that? Last year, one of the best, now one of the worst. Countries we made fun of now are making fun of us. Seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really saddening.
I think someone posted on social media today, and it got me really sad. Was like, I think it was last year, roughly this date, we had one case, but it was a foreign case. So one case, zero case tempatan. And today is 6,000. Don't know how, God knows how much. But
6,998.
Yeah, but 2 days ago, I spoke with Associate Professor Gauss, who mentioned this quite interesting. He said the cities with all those open stadiums, they are the test subjects. So like in a few weeks' time, if there are no big outbreaks, then we know that when you get a certain level of vaccination, then we can open up too. So in a way, yeah, I that's the positive way to look at it lah. Ashley Howe has a rather interesting question, which I would love to get to hear your answer. She asked, what kind of mental, physical, emotional, psychological training do you do to defend against people's biasness towards you for being young or looking young?
Well, that's a very interesting question. First thing first is to convince myself. I mean, before you start convincing others, you have to convince yourself that being young in no way is a liability. You are not suboptimal to others out there. That what we lack in experience, we make up with our enthusiasm, passion, military discipline, and diligence. We work so much harder, but most importantly, our ability to innovate and to think critically and out of the box. That's where we see many young disruptors disrupting many different corporate sectors, and now also in politics as well. So I think I've convinced myself that just because you're young, in no way are you weaker or subpar to those who are much, much older. And once you convince yourself, then it's about convincing others. And that's where I think I've learned something, and it took a while. I won't be so personally affected when someone says, you're too young. That's why in Parliament, when people saw me being ridiculed for my age, they say, you should be really angry. I'm like, no, it's okay. Let the world see what the guy is saying, calling me budak-budak, choo-choo, whatever. But people are saying, I'm talking about a real issue, a policy reform, about implementing windfall tax. And this person is just talking about my age. I mean, Malaysians, all and young, are smart enough to know that that's the kind of politics which we want to reject, right? So really, instead of, if we can't convince that person, we will convince everyone around him. So I think it's a step-by-step process. And the other part, I think, is my upbringing, right? I mean, I come from a working class family, and my mom has taught me. My mom is like a tiger mom, a teacher. And when my dad lost his job many times, he commutes from Johor to Singapore every day as a laborer. It was my mom who took up the mantle. And she taught me, when there's a will, there's a way. Di mana ada kemahuan, di situ ada jalan. And she works ridiculously hard. So I learned from her, and I've had that mindset from young. And when I entered military school, I think that trained me a lot as well. So upbringing plays a very important role.
Yeah.
Final thing I'd like to say is, I mean, when we get, for someone who's in public limelight, don't take things so hard. There will be those who will criticize either constructively, or those who will just chachi maki, condemn for no particular reason. Instead of taking it personally, try to understand where the anger is coming from, and learn as much as possible.
Yeah, I like the way you answered the question. You have to convince yourself first. And I remember I really like the way you answered that boomer MP. You said that cucu YB sedang tengok, which is I wish they really took that to heart. This is a great question from Ming Huang on YouTube, and I think we'll make this the last question. Would like to ask YB's view with regards to the Malaysian Constitution of Ketuanan Melayu. Politicians will always use this card to justify their actions given that we have an ethnicity supremacy policy. What is your view?
Okay, for this, I want to give a little bit of context. Article 153, 160 have always been part of our constitution. The policies around women policy were largely came about after the 1969 riots through the National Economic Policy during Tun Abdul Razak's time. Interestingly, if you read the original document, if you read the literature from Jas Fahlen, Harvard professor, who also helped constructing the NEP framework, it was very noble. The intention was to alleviate poverty among all races, Malay, Chinese, Indians, and that was the focus. Why was FELDA, FELCRA, MARA created, right? It is meant to create economic equity so that the wealth of Malaysia could be shared by all. It is in no way meant to cement the superiority of a particular race. When you focus on poverty, it's not about superiority. Poverty is an enemy of all Malaysians.
Yep.
And that was the main purpose, right? That's why when MARA was constructed, you don't see even DAP or you don't see then, Chinese ministers or MPs saying, oh my God, no. Why? Because they themselves will agree that we need to give scholarships to underprivileged Malays who have been so left out from the economic mainstream so that then they can catch up, right? And that's where we see a lot more doctors, economists, accountants coming up, things which we didn't see in the 1950s and 1960s. However, it became a problem when a policy which is meant to alleviate Malaysians from poverty then being made an issue of superiority. I deserve this because I'm born in this particular race. What's the way forward? I preach a more needs-based approach and a more policy-based approach. So what is my criticism of the NEP? When it was done well in the 1970s, we support. But after 20 and 30 years, when it's meant to buttress the Malay aristocratic class, where MARA, which was once meant to help the underprivileged Malays, now meant to give out contracts and bailouts towards rich Malay aristocrats, that's ridiculous. To give scholarships towards privileged Malay families, that's ridiculous. Instead of giving that privileged Malay family, we should be giving it towards the underprivileged Chinese or underprivileged Malays who deserve it, right? Because in the end, it's meant to alleviate poverty. You look at MRSMs. I remember prior to PH coming in, it almost become a group of elites, while MRSM, when it was first conceptualized, meant to help, those in rural areas to get good access to education.
Exactly,
right?
Yep.
And I remember we fought it and we changed the policy. There's a specialized quota, increase in numbers for B40, right? So, I mean, there are a lot of areas. When people keep on talking about this Ketuanan Melayu, I always say, after 60 years of independence, look at Sabah, right? Where the majority are Bumiputras. A quarter of Sabahans today, Bumiputras, after decades of the same policy, still live below poverty line. Where is the justice in that? It clearly shows that there is a policy failure. And when there's a policy failure, we need a policy reform to look at changing how we structure Malaysia's economy. And that's where some will say remove everything and some will say keep everything. I think there's a middle ground. And that middle ground is to look at data and policy and reform on that. Okay. I think that's the best way for Malaysia to move forward.
All right. Thanks, Ming Huang, for the excellent question. I've taken up a lot of your time. That was we have spoken for 1.5 hours. Thank you so much, YB, for your time. I really appreciate it on your Friday night. Just to wrap it up, what are your final messages to everyone watching? We have about I'm a social media whore, so we have about 4,000 people watching.
Oh,
so what? No, 3,400. What are your final messages?
Yeah, in brief, these are tough times for Malaysians, especially for young Malaysians. Those who are in school, they can't access online education because of the lack of internet or gadget. Those who just graduated, looking at a possibility of long-term unemployment, and those who do get a job will take a huge salary cut and will go through hardship. It's not easy. The least we can do is that we open our eyes, listen a lot more to ensure that those around us are okay. I mean, every day, 4 suicide cases, and the number will increase as each day passes by. So we all have a role to play. I mean, I don't want to talk about the government, politics. We all have a role to play. Always reach out to your family members, to your friends. Ask them, how are they feeling? How's their mental health? Call them up. And if we see anyone who's waving the white flag, do not be like the Menteri Besar of Kedah and say, this is a political stunt, I will not help them. Show compassion and humanity. Reach out to them. If we don't have money, lend them our ears. That's the least that we can do, right? Everyone has a role to play. Everyone can contribute in smallest to the biggest of ways. I think the strength of Malaysia has always been in our compassion and our unity, that we know in the end our fates are interconnected to one another, and our success is a shared journey which we'll take together. And I believe that we will come out of this COVID stronger together, but we must play a role in moving forward together. So hopefully we will stay strong as Malaysians in these tough times.
All right. Thank you, YB, for your time. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a good weekend ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye, YB.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jason. Take care, everyone. I'm going to eat my nasi
Bye.
lemak.